Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today's video is going to be my March book reviews part 1. Part 2 is probably going to have the same amount of books as I'm going to show you right now. In March I have been a reading beast. I don't know what's wrong with me. As soon as I finish one book I have this like craving to pick up another one, and I've read so much in March, so look out for part 2 as well. I have loved it. It's been so great, like slipping into so many different worlds. Because I've read so much, I'm just going to get straight into this, and this may be a long video. So first up in the month, I read Heartburn by Nora Ephron. This was originally published in 1983. It's about a woman who she's heavily pregnant, she's got a great job, she's a food writer, her husband's got a great job, they're living like the dream life, they've got a small toddler together, and she finds out her husband is having an affair on her. And it's really about her processing that. An element within this which I adored is that there's so many recipes within it, because she's a food writer. So she'll talk about, oh, we went to this dinner party and I cooked a dessert, and then she'll give you the full recipe of how to make the dessert. And I loved that in the back of the book it had a contents page of all the different desserts, so you can go back and make those foods if you want to. I loved that element within it, because obviously it's her job to be a food writer, so you can imagine her talking that way and talking in a way about food because she's obsessed with it and memories linked to food. I adored this. This was fantastic, and it was so funny. Like, it doesn't sound like it's funny. It's about this woman, terrible to see, like she's pregnant, there's nothing she can do, she's going to give birth to this baby to a man who's being deceitful and he's in love with another woman. She knows the other woman as well, who he's having an affair with, so that's really interesting because it's like an added deceit on top of it. She's like, I've had this woman in my house. So you find out her relationship to the woman he's having an affair with, and she decides she's going to take their son and she's just going to go to New York, and she's going to live in her dad's apartment in New York for a while till she can sort her head out. So this is really what this is. She's heavily pregnant, she's trying to process the whole situation, and it's so funny. And there's a lot of talk about she's Jewish and being a Jewish woman in New York. She talks about that a lot. I just loved the whole thing. I thought it was so good, and it was funny but also heartbreaking at the same time. Loved it. It was perfect. Honestly, it could have been longer. Absolutely adored that. I then just wanted to mention some Snoopy Charlie Brown comics that I've been reading. I wanted to mention them because I just love them. This is Love and Kisses Snoopy, and this is Good Grief Charlie Brown, and they're by Charlie M. Schlucksch. And you probably know of the Snoopy comics, but I just absolutely love them, and they're not children's humour. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to read them because I don't really like, you know, kids fiction, they're not kids fiction at all. They're really like smart humour for adults. It follows a group of children and one of their dog, but it's so like sarcastic, clever, sophisticated humour. I just love it so much. So I just wanted to mention I did read these two because I absolutely love Snoopy and the gang. They're really good. I then read The Burning by Laura Bates. This is by Simon and Schuster, and this came out this year, and I actually asked for a copy of it and they kindly sent me one. So this is about a teenage girl who she used to live in Birmingham, and for some reason her and her mum have had to move from Birmingham to a small town in Scotland, and she's very much living incognito. Like, she doesn't want anyone to know her, she doesn't want to make any connections to the people at her new school, and there's this real cloud of dread over her that something terrible happened at her old school, and she doesn't want anyone at her new school to find out about it. And it's really heartbreaking because she's not being herself, she's trying to be like a ghost. She wants to be completely, no one can see her and get near her. You then find out very early on, and you kind of know what it's about if you read the back of it as well, is that it's all to do with revenge porn. So revenge porn is when someone sends a sexual picture of themselves to someone, and then the person who receives the picture then puts it online on porn websites or shows it around their friends. So she sent a picture to someone, and that person spread it around the whole entire school and then put it online. And obviously once those pictures are online, they're very difficult to police. It's heartbreaking. It's so good. I think it's such a good book for our time. Also, there's so many themes of witchcraft within this, because she has to do a school project on a local person of interest, and she finds out that a woman was once accused of being a witch in where she's living now. So she wants to find out what happened to this woman who was accused of being a witch. Was she killed? What happened with that situation? And it's really saying that this whole thing of revenge porn, people taking pictures and putting them online of people. It's very much like the witchcraft. It's all to do with shame. It's all to do with shaming women. And it's predominantly teenage girls who send these nude pictures, and then teenage boys put them online to shame the girls. And then everyone doesn't want to talk to the girl or have anything to do with her. And it's very much like that shut out of the witchcraft. Like, you're a witch, no one listen to her. I loved this. It broke my little heart, but I really loved it. I thought it was so sad. I thought also it dealt really well with, like, she makes friends and people who she thinks are her friends, but they're embarrassed by her past and how easily people can kind of turn their backs on you and how unfair that whole situation is. I loved this. It was so good. I loved also the girl kept having these dreams, and when she had her dreams, she was the witch. So then that's how we found out about what happened to the witch, is through these snippets of information that were kind of peppered throughout the whole entire book. Oh, it was so perfect. Also, if you have a teenager in your life, give them this book, because I know a lot of parents get really awkward about, they're like, my child wouldn't send a nude, my child wouldn't be engaging in that or forcing someone to send a nude. And I think it's a really good book for that, because it's all about peer pressure. It's normally about a boy saying to a teenage girl, I'm going to tell everyone you're frigid if you don't send me a picture, and it's that bullying. And I thought it was just done so well. Such an important book for our time, because revenge porn is such a massive issue. Really great book. Love the cover, love the witchcraft, loved it. Fabulous. I then read a manga, which I don't talk a lot about mangas on this channel. My boyfriend is really into mangas, so I may get him to do a video on mangas. This is the Ancient Magus Bride Volume 1. I'll show you some of the artwork. So the artwork is really beautiful, really nice. And this is about, like, brace yourselves. This creature here that has a carcass for a head buys this girl, buys her at an auction, buys her to be his apprentice, and he's all magical, and she is kind of realising that maybe she's a bit magical as well, because she thinks she's just going to be helping him out, but he's trying to bring out her magical powers and be like, you're like more than what you think you are. I found it was really interesting. The bit that I found a bit creepy is that he buys her to be his apprentice and his bride. So he's like, we're going to get married and be together. And that was all like, ew. But I thought it was really good. I loved all the surreal elements. There was a bit at the end of it when they went to this town and all the cats could talk, and it was run by all these different cats. And you'd have like a cat and it would jump down from the wall and start talking. I loved all those bits. It was just mental. Like, it really was the most bizarre thing I think I've ever read. And then he puts a bit of material over this bit of his face when he goes outside so people don't become scared. He's got massive horns. I was just like, what? Like a little bit of cloth. Oh, that'll do it. Just mad. Absolutely mental. But so many memorable characters. Bizarre, weird. I will be reading on. I really do like that. If you like really off the wall weirdness, then that is definitely for you. Next up, I read The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry. This is non-fiction. And Grayson Perry is a UK modern artist, but he's also a transvestite, and he talks about that in this book. And he is known for dressing up, I would say, like a pantomime dame. So he wears really bright makeup and then these massive, like, costume dresses. But in his actual life, he does sometimes dress as a man, sometimes dress as a woman. And this book is really talking about that. It's talking a little bit about his life, but it's really about men in general. So he's talking about different types of men that we have in UK society, and how he thinks some men need to change in order to survive, and they need to adapt. And it was to do with so many different things, like you talk about domestic violence and men that like do that, who beat up their wives. And his stepdad used to beat up his mum. So he said the only masculine thing he used to see was this man who beat up his mum, and that's just what he thought men were like. And he talks about his relationship with his mum, who had an issue with him. I think she was probably a bit scared of him, it sounded, because he was this little boy who wanted to dress up like a woman and was quite effeminate at times, and maybe that frightened her. I don't know. I know that Grayson Perry actually didn't have a relationship with his mum at the end of her life. So I think she just was very kind of frightened of him, and then yeah, there was just like a lot going on. I didn't like this. That's it, bottom line. There's a lot more I could talk about this book. There's a lot more in it than I'm saying. I just didn't like it, so I don't want to like waffle on about it. I felt like everything in this book I already knew. Like, I knew about certain things. I also felt like he was kind of saying, you know, men feel like they can't show their emotions and different stuff. I feel like we've moved on. I feel like a lot of men can show their emotions, so I felt like a little bit was kind of redundant. Also, I couldn't work out who it was for, because he was talking like as if he was talking to a fellow man, but I think a man who, you know, beats his wife up and then goes out at the weekend and beats up a load of men and is a football hooligan is not going to be picking up this book and reading it, but it did feel like it was kind of meant for that kind of man. I just really couldn't get on board with this book, and this whole idea that if a man has a female boss and maybe that man's sexist so he doesn't want a female as his boss, that we had to kind of like get him on board and make him understand it's okay. I'm not his mum. And I feel like a lot of books, when they're talking about women and like men who are resistant towards men and women having equality, they often want the women to mother the men, like sit the men down, talk to them about the situation, bring them on board. We're past that point. We're past that point in history. That was a bit of time ago when we had to do that. But now I feel we have to be a lot more zero tolerance. And if you're a female boss and say someone in your team, a man, is being rude to you and sassing you, you would just fire him because you say that's unprofessional in the workplace. That would be it. It wouldn't be to do with whether, you know, you might not say, oh, I think it's because sexism or whatever. You'd say he's just being rude. He just needs to be fired. I don't need to sit down with him, it's fine. And so I felt like it wasn't really zero tolerance enough, and I feel like we're much more at a point where I don't want to be someone's mum. I don't want to have to sit down with a man and be like, we should have equal rights, you should, no, like you should grow up and move aside. Like honestly, I have no tolerance. That's just me personally. So I hated that book, to be honest with you. Next up, let's get more into positive beat. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos. This was published in the 20s, and this character, who her name is Harper Lee. Harper Lee is a gold digging blonde set in the 20s, and before this book came about, the author wrote her as kind of sketches in a magazine, so it was all these different sketches, then got turned into a play, and then obviously the very successful film with Marilyn Monroe, and this book was published in 1925, and this is a diary of the character Harper Lee. So it's so good. She's an American, she's gold digging, but she never says she's a gold digger. So she'll say stuff like, I've met an older gentleman, he's bought me this and he's bought me that, and I'm kind of living off him, but it's just because he wants to educate me and make me into, you know, like society and help me in society. And really, you know, it's just like a gold digging situation. So there's this man who she's kind of connected to him, but he has a wife, and then she decides she doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. She wants to just marry someone and be with someone. So the man freaks out and he sends her on a trip to Europe, and he sends her with her friend Dorothy. So Dorothy, Harper always looks down on, and she's like, Dorothy is so unsophisticated, ugh. Whereas Harper's exactly the same as Dorothy, she just can't see it herself. But they go to all the different countries in Europe, and it's all about their travels, and she's talking about the different places. I loved it. I loved the end. I thought it was so funny, like really laugh out loud humour. It was fantastic. The beginning bit before they go to Europe became very repetitive because it was kind of setting up, you know, every night she's got a different date and a different man she's going out with, and that got a bit repetitive. But as soon as they got on the ship and they were off to Europe, loved it. I thought it was absolutely fabulous. Great book, loved it. Loved the character, loved all the different characters because there were so many memorable people, fantastically written. I then have, this is kind of like a joke book you could buy for someone. This was sent to me by the publishers, which the publishers are Modern Books, and this is based on an Instagram account. So there's an Instagram account and it's all about boys with plants, so men. They have a picture of a good looking man with a selection of indoor plants, and then in the book they've got a bit about them. So you can go on the actual Instagram page, which is just full of good looking men and their indoor plants. And so in this it will say the person's Instagram, so you can go follow them if you want, their name, what they do as a job, and then their advice about keeping indoor plants. It's very camp, it's very fun. This whole book is like, there's pictures like that. Like a naked man holding a plant. I think it's a great gift book. There's just so many like odd pictures, and also it's men from all around the world. So it's got it from loads of different countries, different men sitting with their plants. It's just camp and fun, and I really did enjoy this. So this is a great book, and also some great tips about keeping indoor plants. So yeah, it's just like a fun book, be a great gift for someone. I then read Lily Allen's My Thoughts Exactly. This was sent to me by the publishers Blink. I requested it because I really wanted to read it, and they very nicely sent it over to me. So Lily Allen is a UK pop star, and this is a book about her life. It's in different sections, but really it covers her life from childhood to now. So she is known for her pop music, but she also goes into her parents, her relationship with them, her relationship with drugs. She also had a miscarriage, and it goes into everything to do with that. I thought this was really interesting, and it was really interesting take on the music industry and how there are people in the music industry who are continually trying to like shaft you over with different deals, and how they're in the interest of the music industry, not in the interest of you, so they'll sign you on really rubbish deals. I found that really interesting. I found it heartbreaking when she was talking about her miscarriage, because what happened is she had to deliver the baby, so they had to give her drugs so that she had to deliver the baby, but the baby had died inside of her and she was far along in her pregnancy, so she had to deliver this baby, and the time between her knowing the baby has died inside of you and the baby actually being delivered out of her was 10 hours, because they have to give you drugs, and the drugs have to wait to work and then force your body to force the baby out. And because it wasn't like full-term pregnancy, they couldn't use clamps or anything to get the baby out, which I didn't know anything of that. I didn't know you had to wait for like 10 hours. You have to wait for these drugs to start giving you contractions, even though you're laying there knowing your baby is dead inside of you. Like, that bit was just heartbreaking, and she really did say about that she can't really say a lot on it because she doesn't know what she felt. She can never go back to that time. It's almost as if her mind just left her body for a while and she couldn't really talk about it. It's a lot about, she kind of self-destructs her life quite a lot for various different reasons to do with the press and stuff. I really found it so interesting when she was talking about her stalker. So I think it's in kind of the last few years she had a stalker, and it was a man who had convinced himself that he had written her very famous song The Fear, but this man had severe psychological problems and had been in and out of mental hospitals his whole life, this man. So I can imagine he'd been put on different drugs, had different diagnoses, was very confused, and he became transfixed on Lily Allen, and they had to get her, to the point he actually broke into her house. And I found that really interesting, how he broke into her house and was obsessed with her. He actually got sentenced for that, and he got put in a mental hospital, but I think he's come out since then, and it's all very frightening how he's not getting any kind of help. And I think that really highlighted in the UK system how, one, we don't take stalking seriously enough, but two, how people who are in a lot of pain and are psychologically damaged, how we just like put them in an institution for a little while and then just put them back into society and don't kind of help them and give them any kind of support system. And she was saying she actually felt really sorry for this man, even though he did traumatize her in her life. You know, when you find out stuff that he wrote about her and said about her, and he threatened to kill her, and in court he said that he needed to kill her, and he told his mum that he needed to kill a celebrity, like all this crazy stuff. And now the system's just kind of like spat him back out and forgotten about him, so he'll obviously do something else, and then he'll have to go back in. And I just felt that was sad, that whole situation. But it was really interesting on like the police, how they don't take stalking seriously at all. There were so many great things in this. There were so many great elements within it. I really did personally enjoy it. Also, a big theme of this book is codependency. So she's talking about how she puts everything in one person. So she'll date one man, put everything into his hands, and she wants him to kind of look after her, and then when they break up she goes straight on to another person. And I think a lot of people in society have that codependency problem, so I thought that was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. I then, last but not least, read a controversial pick. This is Go Set A Watchman by Harper Lee. Now, Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, fantastic, one of my all-time favourite, great book. And then in 1950s, mid-1950s, I don't know when, she wrote this book, and she didn't want this book to be published. I personally don't believe she ever wanted this book to see the light of day, but I still read it, and I'm still going to give you my opinions on it. So in To Kill a Mockingbird, you have a little girl called Scout, and it's all to do with racism within the South. So in this book, Scout is now an adult, and she's going back to her town in the South to see her dad and to see her family members. Her brother is dead in this. You find out right at the beginning he's dead. So I found that bit like a bit shocking that she killed him off. And then you find out about, in it's so difficult to explain because you can't read this book without having read To Kill a Mockingbird, let me say that first, because no one is properly introduced, so you'd have to know her history with them. So the majority of people who read this are going to have read To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's really about the people around her in her town, and her family members are resisting the civil rights movement. So the civil rights movements are happening, and the white people in her town and the white people in her family are saying, no, we don't want black people to have the same rights as white people in the South. That is not what we want. And they're resisting that. And she's in complete shock, because if you've read To Kill a Mockingbird, she's talking about her dad, Atticus, how he's like so forward thinking and he's all about equal rights between races. And then in this book, he's talking about how he's not about equal rights, and how he would like everyone in the South who is white to kind of have a job and be raised up to a certain level, and then allow the civil rights movement to begin. But he doesn't think that different races should have the same rights as white people. If the white people are living in poverty, he kind of wants the white people to always be ahead of everyone else, I would say, is what it sounded like to me. This did actually happen in the South, this backlash to the civil rights movement, and this is what this book goes into. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really about disillusionment. I thought it was about when you hold someone up to be a hero and then you realise that they're not. So as a little girl, she always looked up to her dad as being this perfect being, and then as an adult she realises he's not who I thought he was. I've held him up to such a high level. You can't hold someone up to such a high level because people make mistakes, people have ignorances that you may not know about. Also looking at stuff from a child's eyes and then re-evaluating them as an adult. I really enjoyed this, and the whole book, it's really Scout running about town, talking to different people, trying to get their points of view, and she's going, you're all crazy, I can't believe you want to like not give people rights and you're all mad. And they're saying to her, no, you're mad. She has also gone off to live in, I believe, New York. So she's living in New York, and New York's very modern and forward thinking, and it's the difference between New York and the South of America. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really a great book. I think it's very unfair also to compare it to Kill a Mockingbird. So when people say it's not as good as To Kill a Mockingbird, it's not our best work. No, it's not. To Kill a Mockingbird is much better, but I don't think Harper Lee ever intended this to be published. And for a work that I don't think Harper Lee thought was very good, it's absolutely fantastic. Like, it's better than most authors, because that's just how good Harper Lee is. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. It felt a little bit unfinished, which obviously it was. It could have been longer, but I did really enjoy it. And that is it. That is the end of part 1. I will have part 2 up soon. I just have a few books to finish for that, and then I have all them to talk about. Tell me what is your favourite book that you read this month, and I will see you again soon for another video.